No one could explain why the wolves never crossed the frozen river anymore. For 20 years, the northern forest had remained strangely quiet, as though every creature hidden beneath its towering pines had agreed to disappear from the world of men. Hunters still spoke of glowing eyes watching from the darkness. Children still whispered stories about an immortal alpha king, and old grandmothers still warned that anyone who heard wolves singing beneath a full moon would never return home. Most people laughed at those stories. Until the night a blind wolf collapsed beneath a hunter's arrow. And until one forgotten village healer chose compassion over fear. She lifted the wounded creature into her arms without knowing she had just carried the greatest secret of the kingdom across her own doorstep. By sunrise, wolves surrounded her home without attacking. By sunset, hunters wanted her dead. And somewhere beyond the endless mountains, an ancient king who had hidden himself for generations quietly opened his eyes, knowing that destiny had finally found the one person brave enough to uncover a truth buried beneath centuries of lies. Autumn arrived early in the northern borderlands. The first snow had not yet fallen, but winter already whispered through the forests. Cold rain drifted across endless mountains, soaking ancient pine trees whose roots had held the land together long before the oldest castles were built. Mist floated between the trunks like wandering spirits, swallowing narrow trails until travelers could barely see their own footsteps. Far beyond the rich cities of the kingdom stood a small village called Ashmore. It was the kind of place that never appeared on royal maps. Its cottages leaned against one another as if they needed each other's strength to survive another winter. Smoke curled from stone chimneys every evening, carrying the comforting smell of burning cedar into the cold air. Chickens wandered muddy streets. Horses rested beneath wooden shelters. Life moved slowly there, measured not by clocks but by the changing seasons. Everyone knew everyone. Everyone carried someone else's burdens. And everyone knew Elara. She lived alone at the very edge of the village where the last fences gave way to the wild forest. Her cottage was no larger than a stable. Its roof sagged beneath years of storms. Ivy climbed its stone walls. Small bundles of dried herbs hung beneath the windows, filling the air with the gentle scents of lavender, rosemary, sage, and wild mint. A narrow stream flowed beside the house, singing softly over smooth stones before disappearing into the woods. Most mornings began the same way. Before sunrise, Elara would wrap herself in a thick wool cloak, carry an old wicker basket over one shoulder, and disappear into the forest while the village still slept. She knew every flower that bloomed beneath the ferns, every mushroom hidden beneath fallen logs, every healing root buried beneath frozen soil. She spoke little. Not because she disliked people. Because nature had always answered her more honestly than words ever could. Birds landed near her feet without fear. Deer often watched her from quiet clearings. Even nervous rabbits paused their escape long enough to study the gentle woman who never carried traps or bows. Her kindness had become a quiet legend. Whenever someone became sick, they knocked on Elara's door. Whenever an injured animal was found beside the road, someone carried it to her cottage. She never asked for payment. Sometimes people left fresh bread. Sometimes eggs. Sometimes nothing at all. She accepted every gift with the same grateful smile. Yet kindness could never silence fear. Especially in Ashmore. Because beyond the tree line lived wolves. Old men claimed they had once hunted entire packs. Women remembered stories of livestock disappearing beneath moonlit skies. Children dared each other to step into the forest after sunset. Whether the stories were true hardly mattered anymore. Fear had survived longer than memory. One rainy afternoon, Elara entered the village square carrying bundles of freshly gathered herbs tied together with twine. The market had nearly finished for the day. Farmers packed their wagons. Blacksmiths covered glowing coals. Children chased one another through puddles until worried mothers called them home. As Elara passed the old well, she noticed several hunters gathered beneath the wooden shelter. Their boots were coated with mud. Fresh blood stained their leather gloves. One heavy iron snare rested against the wall beside them. Captain Garrick stood at the center of the group. He was taller than most men, broad across the shoulders, with a thick grey beard that did little to soften the hard lines of his face. A long scar crossed one cheek, fading into his beard like an old crack in stone. His voice carried across the square. "We found tracks again." The nearby conversations faded. Everyone listened. Larger than any wolf I've ever hunted. Someone asked quietly, "How many?" Garrick's eyes remained fixed on the forest. "Enough." Another hunter spat into the mud. "They're gathering." A nervous silence settled over the square. An elderly woman crossed herself. A father instinctively pulled his young daughter closer. Elara slowed her steps. She had seen wolf tracks before. Many times. Never once had they approached the village. The forest always seemed to keep its distance. Yet something inside Garrick's expression unsettled her. Not fear. Excitement. Like a man who had waited years for something to happen. He finally noticed Elara watching. His eyes narrowed. "You spend more time in those woods than anyone." She nodded politely. "I gather herbs." "You ever see the silver one?" She frowned. "The silver one?" "The blind wolf." Several hunters exchanged uneasy glances. One muttered under his breath. "They say it can't see. But somehow, it always escapes." Another hunter lowered his voice. "My grandfather claimed the thing was older than the kingdom." Laughter followed. Forced laughter. The kind people use when they desperately hope a story isn't true. Garrick rested one hand upon the iron trap. "If you find it." His gaze sharpened. "Leave it." Elara looked at the rusted jaws of the snare. "They're cruel. They work. They don't kill quickly. They aren't supposed to." She met his stare. "There are kinder ways." His expression hardened. "Kindness doesn't protect villages." She said nothing. There was nothing she could say that would change a man whose heart had been shaped by hunting. She simply turned and continued walking. Behind her, she heard him speak one final sentence. "If you choose the wolves over your own people." His voice disappeared beneath a gust of wind. "Don't expect your people to choose you." The rain began before sunset. Not gentle rain. A storm. Clouds swallowed the mountains until day vanished hours too early. Wind bent pine trees like grass. Thunder rolled through the valley with enough force to shake windows. Most villagers barred their doors. Even the animals hid. Elara should have stayed home. She knew that. But old Mrs. Bramble lived alone across the eastern fields, and the elderly woman desperately needed fresh fever herbs before nightfall. So Elara pulled her hood over her head, tucked the herbs safely beneath her cloak, lit a lantern, and stepped into the storm. Rain struck her face like handfuls of icy pebbles. The muddy path quickly disappeared beneath rushing water. Every few moments lightning split the sky, revealing twisted branches stretching overhead like enormous skeletal fingers. The forest sounded different during storms. The wind howled through the pines. Branches groaned. Streams overflowed. Somewhere far away, an owl cried once before falling silent. Halfway back from Mrs. Bramble's cottage, Elara stopped. She thought she had heard something. Not thunder. Not wind. A cry. Weak. Painful. Barely louder than the rain itself. She lifted the lantern higher. Nothing. Only darkness. Again. A faint sound drifted through the storm. Not human. Animal. She left the path. Wet branches scraped against her cloak as she climbed through thick undergrowth. Mud clung heavily to her boots. Rain blurred the lantern's glow until every shadow seemed alive. The sound came again. Closer now. A low, broken whimper. She rounded an enormous fallen pine. Then froze. A silver wolf lay trapped beneath twisted iron jaws. One foreleg had been caught inside a hunter's snare. Blood mixed with rainwater beneath the rusted steel. The animal was enormous. Far larger than any wolf she had ever imagined. Its fur shimmered like weathered silver beneath flashes of lightning. Scars crossed its powerful shoulders, telling stories of battles survived long ago. Yet it did not growl. It did not bare its teeth. Its pale white eyes stared into nothing. Clouded. Empty. Blind. The wolf slowly lifted its head toward the sound of her breathing. Not because it saw her. Because it heard her. Its chest rose unevenly. Each breath looked painful. Elara's own breathing became shallow. Every lesson she had ever heard echoed inside her mind. Stay away. Run. Leave it. It is still a wolf. Then she looked at the iron trap. The cruel teeth had crushed the leg almost to the bone. Nearby she noticed another arrow buried deep inside the wet earth. The hunters had wounded it. Then left it here. Waiting. Waiting for exhaustion. Waiting for death. The wolf lowered its head once more. Not in surrender. In silence. As though it no longer expected mercy from anyone. Rain poured over its motionless body. Elara slowly knelt. Her hands trembled. Not from fear alone. From the terrible weight of the choice before her. If Gerrick found out. If the villagers discovered what she had done. Everything would change. Lightning illuminated the clearing once more. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw dozens of distant shapes standing silently between the trees. Watching. Waiting. Then darkness swallowed them again. Elara took one slow breath. Very carefully. She reached for the iron trap. The iron jaws were colder than winter itself. Rainwater streamed over the rusted steel as Elara wrapped both trembling hands around the heavy spring. Mud clung beneath her fingernails. Her boots slipped against the soaked earth. Every muscle in her arms strained until her shoulders burned with pain. The trap barely moved. Another flash of lightning lit the clearing. For the briefest moment, the silver wolf lifted its head. Though its blind eyes saw nothing, its ears turned toward her, listening to every breath she drew. It did not struggle. It did not snap its jaws. It simply waited. Almost as if it understood. Elara gritted her teeth. With one desperate effort, she forced the trap open just enough for the wounded leg to slide free. The heavy jaws slammed shut again with a crack that echoed through the forest. She fell backward into the mud, breathing hard. The wolf remained where it was. Blood continued to drip from the mangled leg, mixing with rain until crimson ribbons disappeared into the rushing water. Slowly, Elara reached inside her satchel. She pulled out strips of clean linen, a small clay jar of crushed yarrow leaves, and a pouch filled with ground willow bark. Her movements were careful. Never hurried. Never threatening. She spoke softly, not expecting the wolf to understand her words, but believing that a gentle voice might calm its fear. You've already suffered enough. The wolf's ears twitched. Its nose lifted slightly. It caught the scent of herbs instead of blood. Elara carefully spread the thick green paste across the wound. The wolf's muscles tightened, but it never pulled away. It merely released a slow breath that drifted like mist into the cold air. You are stronger than you know, she whispered. The storm answered with another growl of thunder. She wrapped the leg as tightly as she dared. The injury was deep. Far deeper than she first believed. There was no chance the wolf could survive another night alone. She looked toward the village. Then back at the forest. No one would help her. No one. Her choice had already been made the moment she touched the trap. She slipped one arm beneath the wolf's neck and another beneath its chest. The animal was impossibly heavy. Every step became a struggle through thick mud. Several times she stumbled. Several times she nearly collapsed. Still, she refused to leave it behind. The blind wolf never resisted. Its head rested against her shoulder, its breathing shallow and uneven. Far above them, hidden among the trees, shadows moved. Not hunters. Wolves. Silent. Watching. Following. The journey home lasted nearly 2 hours. By the time Elara reached her cottage, the storm had begun to weaken. Rain fell in softer sheets now, tapping gently against the roof. She pushed open the wooden door with her shoulder and helped the wolf inside. Warmth greeted them. A small fire still burned inside the stone hearth. Bundles of herbs hung from the ceiling beams. The familiar scent of cedar smoke wrapped around the room like an old blanket. She spread several wool blankets beside the fireplace before easing the wolf onto them. The animal let out a quiet sigh. Not relief. Exhaustion. Its body trembled with every breath. Elara knelt beside it. Only now, beneath the steady light of the fire, could she truly see what the storm had hidden. The wolf was old. Not weak. Old. Thin silver scars crossed its muzzle. One ear carried a deep tear that had healed many years before. Its paws were worn smooth from countless journeys over stone and snow. But it was the eyes that held her attention. Milky white. Completely clouded. There was no injury. No fresh wound. Blindness had claimed them long ago. Yet something about its face remained strangely noble. Its head rested proudly even while wounded. Its breathing remained calm despite the pain. It reminded her less of a wild animal, and more of an aging king who had forgotten what surrender meant. She cleaned the wound once more, applied fresh herbs, fed the fire, then filled a wooden bowl with warm water. The wolf sniffed the air before carefully finding the bowl with its nose. Not once did it spill a drop. Elara smiled faintly. So you still know your way. The corners of her tired eyes softened. You've been blind for a long time. The wolf slowly lifted its head toward the sound of her voice. For one quiet moment, the room felt less lonely than it had in years. Morning arrived beneath pale grey skies. The storm had passed. Sunlight filtered gently through the frosted windows. Elara woke before dawn as she always did. She expected to find the wolf gone. Instead, it still lay beside the fire. Its breathing had become steadier. Its ears lifted the instant she entered the room. It knew exactly where she was. She prepared a simple broth for herself before roasting venison left by a grateful hunter weeks earlier. After cutting the meat into small pieces, she placed them beside the wolf. The old animal sniffed carefully before eating with surprising patience. Never once did it snap greedily. Never once did it waste food. Every movement carried quiet dignity. After breakfast, Elara opened the cottage door. Fresh mountain air drifted inside. The wolf slowly stood. Its injured leg barely touched the floor. For a heartbeat, she wondered if it intended to leave. Instead, it limped toward her, stopped, lowered its great silver head until its nose gently brushed the back of her hand. The touch lasted only a second. Soft, warm, trusting. Elara closed her eyes. She had cared for hundreds of injured animals. None had ever thanked her. Not like this. When she opened her eyes again, the wolf had quietly settled beside the doorway, facing the forest. Guarding. Word traveled quickly through Ashmore. By noon, everyone knew strange tracks had been found outside Elara's cottage. Children whispered about glowing footprints. Old women refused to walk near the forest. Hunters sharpened their blades. Captain Garrick rode directly to the village square before gathering every hunter beneath the old oak tree. His face darkened as one trapper knelt beside a muddy boot print. It escaped. No, another hunter replied quietly. It was freed. Silence followed. Garrick slowly looked toward the distant forest. There aren't many fools willing to save a wolf. One hunter hesitated. What if? What if it wasn't a wolf? Garrick's glare silenced him immediately. There are no spirits. No legends. Only beasts. Yet despite his harsh words, his hand tightened around the handle of his hunting spear. Deep inside, even he was beginning to doubt them. That afternoon, Elara returned to gathering herbs near the stream behind her cottage. The wolf remained close. Never beside her. Never in front. Always a few quiet steps away. Whenever she bent to gather flowers, the wolf lifted its nose toward the breeze. Whenever birds suddenly scattered from nearby trees, the wolf became perfectly still. Twice it gently nudged her away from hidden sinkholes concealed beneath fallen leaves. Once it growled softly before a venomous mountain viper slid silently across the trail. It had never seen danger. Yet somehow, it sensed everything. By sunset, Elara no longer felt as though she was protecting the wolf. The feeling had quietly changed. The wolf was protecting her. Days passed. The wound slowly healed. Color returned beneath the silver fur. Strength returned to the old animal's broad shoulders. Still, it never attempted to leave. Each evening it rested beside the cottage door. Each morning it accompanied Elara through the forest. The villagers noticed. Fear spread like smoke. Doors closed earlier. Children were called indoors before sunset. Some families refused to visit Elara altogether. Only old Mrs. Bramble continued knocking gently on her door. The elderly woman smiled kindly after seeing the wolf lying beside the fire. Instead of screaming, she simply nodded. I wondered if the stories were true. Elara looked up. What stories? Mrs. Bramble warmed her hands near the fire. When I was a little girl, my grandmother used to say that the wolves never harmed the person chosen by the old king. The Alpha King. The old woman stared into the flames. That was the name. I always believed it was only another bedtime tale. She looked toward the blind wolf. I'm no longer certain. That night, the moon rose bright and full above Ashmore. Its silver light washed across rooftops, frozen streams, and sleeping fields. Elara awoke suddenly. Not because of noise. Because of silence. The wolf was gone. Her heart skipped. She grabbed her lantern and hurried outside. The night air bit sharply against her face. Then she stopped. The lantern almost slipped from her fingers. Dozens of wolves stood around the cottage. Grey wolves. Black wolves. White wolves. Young. Old. Large enough to rival horses. Smaller ones scarcely bigger than dogs. They formed a silent circle beneath the moonlight. None growled. None bared their teeth. Every golden eye rested gently upon Elara. Her breathing slowed. Fear urged her to run. Yet nothing in their posture carried hatred. The largest among them stepped forward. It lowered its massive head. Then another followed. And another. Until every wolf bowed in complete silence. The blind silver wolf emerged from the shadows and walked calmly through the center of the gathering. Not leading them. Being honored by them. For several long moments. No one moved. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then, as quietly as they had appeared, the wolves turned toward the northern mountains. One by one, they disappeared into the darkness between the pines. Within moments, the clearing stood empty again. Only the blind wolf remained beside Elara. Something glimmered where the pack had stood. Half buried beneath fresh frost lay an ancient silver pendant carved with the image of a crowned wolf surrounded by stars. Its surface shimmered faintly beneath the moonlight, as though it had been waiting for centuries to be found. The moment Elara lifted it into her hand, far away beyond the northern peaks, a deep, haunting howl rolled across the mountains. Not a cry of warning. Not a cry of grief. It sounded like a kingdom awakening from an endless sleep. Elara did not sleep for the rest of the night. The silver pendant rested in her palm as she sat beside the dying fire, turning it slowly beneath the flickering light. It was heavier than it looked, fashioned from a metal unlike ordinary silver. Time had failed to dull its beauty. Fine lines curled around the edge like twisting vines, surrounding the image of a wolf wearing a crown beneath 7 tiny stars. When she brushed away the last grains of frozen soil, more markings appeared. Not words. Symbols. Ancient ones. She could not read them, yet they stirred something deep inside her, as though the pendant carried echoes of voices long forgotten. Across the room, the blind wolf rested peacefully. Its ears twitched every so often, following the crackling of the fire, the whisper of the wind against the windows, even the soft beat of her heart. Though its eyes remained clouded with endless white, it seemed strangely aware that the pendant had finally returned to human hands. Outside, dawn slowly painted the eastern sky with pale shades of blue. The village would awaken soon. So would the hunters. Elara slipped the pendant beneath her cloak. Whatever it meant, whatever secret it carried, it no longer felt safe inside Ashmore. Morning arrived with uneasy silence. Usually, the village echoed with the sounds of axes striking wood, wagons creaking across muddy roads, and neighbors greeting one another over fences. Today, people spoke in whispers. Whenever Elara appeared, conversations stopped. Curtains shifted. Doors quietly closed. Children who once waved at her were hurried indoors by frightened parents. She felt their eyes following her every step. Not with anger. With fear. Near the village well, 2 women lowered their voices, believing she could not hear them. They say wolves circled her house all night. I heard they bowed. No. They don't bow. They worship. Another woman quickly crossed herself. Whatever lives in that cottage now. It isn't blessed. Elara lowered her gaze and continued walking. Their words stung more deeply than she expected. Only days ago, these same people had trusted her with their sick children and elderly parents. Nothing about her had changed. Only their fear had. Fear, she realized, could erase years of kindness overnight. Captain Garrick waited outside the herbal market. He stood perfectly still beside his horse, one gloved hand resting upon the saddle. The moment Elara approached, he stepped into her path. His grey eyes searched her face carefully. "You've been busy." "I've been gathering herbs." "So have the wolves." She met his stare calmly. "I don't understand." "I think you do." His gaze drifted toward the forest beyond the village. "My scouts found dozens of tracks. They all led to your cottage." She remained silent. His voice lowered. "If you've seen the silver wolf, tell me now." "I haven't seen anything that deserves to die." The answer hung between them. Garrick's jaw tightened. "You always were too soft. And you've always been too eager to kill." For the first time, something dangerous flashed across his face. Not simple anger. Hatred. The hatred of a man whose certainty had been challenged. He stepped closer. "If you hide that beast, you become its prey." Without another word, he turned and mounted his horse. As he rode away, Elara noticed something tucked behind his saddle. 3 fresh iron snares. Larger than the first. Much larger. That afternoon, the blind wolf became restless. It paced quietly around the cottage. Not nervous. Expectant. Several times it paused at the northern window, lifting its nose toward the mountains. Finally, it walked to the door. Stopped. Turned its head toward Elara. Then waited. She understood immediately. "You want me to follow?" The wolf flicked one ear. No sound escaped it. Yet somehow, its silence felt unmistakably clear. Elara packed only what she could carry. A wool blanket. Medicinal herbs. Dried meat. A water skin. Her small hunting knife. Before leaving, she looked around the little cottage that had been her entire world. The worn wooden table. The rocking chair beside the hearth. The shelves lined with glass bottles filled with dried flowers. She did not know if she would ever see any of it again. She gently closed the door behind her. The blind wolf stepped onto the forest path. Without hesitation, it began walking north. The deeper they traveled, the older the forest became. Young pines slowly gave way to towering giants whose trunks were so wide that 3 people together could barely encircle them. Sunlight filtered through countless branches in soft green ribbons. The air smelled of moss, cedar, and damp earth. Birdsong echoed from unseen heights. Tiny streams crossed the trail, their crystal waters dancing over smooth stones polished by centuries. The world seemed untouched. As though humans had never existed here. Elara noticed something else. There were no hunters' traps. No chopped stumps. No abandoned campsites. Even the animals behaved differently. Foxes watched openly from nearby rocks. A family of deer crossed the path without panic. Owls remained perched overhead long after sunrise. The forest no longer feared mankind. Because mankind had long ago stopped coming here. As evening approached, the terrain changed. The ground rose steadily beneath their feet. Massive cliffs surrounded narrow mountain passes where cold winds carried the scent of snow. Among the rocks stood weathered stone pillars almost hidden beneath thick vines. Curiosity drew Elara closer. She brushed moss away with careful fingers. A carving slowly emerged. A wolf. Not snarling. Standing proudly beside a human whose hand rested gently against its shoulder. Neither ruled the other. They stood as equals. More carvings stretched farther along the cliff. Some broken. Some almost erased. One showed wolves guiding travelers through storms. Another showed children playing beside wolf cubs beneath flowering trees. Another revealed a crowned wolf standing beside a human king beneath the same 7 stars engraved upon her pendant. Elara stared in silence. Every story she had ever heard claimed wolves had always been enemies. These stones told another history entirely. one someone had tried very hard to erase. The blind wolf continued climbing. Though its eyes remained empty, it never hesitated. It stepped around loose stones before they shifted, crossed narrow ledges without stumbling, found hidden trails invisible to Elara. Several times she found herself relying upon the old wolf rather than leading it. At sunset, they reached the remains of an ancient shrine. Half the roof had collapsed centuries earlier. Wildflowers grew between cracked stone floors. A weathered statue stood in the center. Time had stolen its face. Only one detail remained untouched. Its outstretched hand rested upon the head of a kneeling wolf. Elara gently removed dead leaves from the statue's feet. Someone had once loved this place. Someone had prayed here. Someone had wanted future generations to remember. Instead, the world had forgotten. A quiet voice broke the silence. "So?" Someone finally answered the forest. Elara spun around. An old man stood beneath a pine tree several steps away. His cloak was woven from rough grey wool patched many times over. Long silver hair rested upon his shoulders. A wooden staff supported his weathered frame. Several ravens perched calmly on nearby branches, showing no fear of him whatsoever. His eyes settled upon the blind wolf. Immediately, the old man's expression softened. He bowed. Not to Elara. To the wolf. The blind animal lowered its head in return. They greeted one another like old friends meeting after many winters apart. "You know him," Elara whispered. The old man smiled faintly. "I knew him before your grandfather was born." He slowly approached. The wolf stepped forward and gently touched its nose against the old man's hand. Deep affection lingered in the simple gesture. "My name is Rowan," the old man said. "I have watched these forests for longer than most kingdoms remember." His eyes finally settled upon the pendant hanging around Elara's neck. The warmth vanished from his face. "You found it. The wolves left it." Rowan closed his eyes for a long moment. "I prayed this day would come." "You know what it is." "I know exactly what it is." His weathered fingers brushed the carved symbol without touching it. That pendant belonged to the first covenant. Covenant? He nodded slowly. A promise. One powerful enough to unite two worlds. Elara looked toward the blind wolf. "It led me here." "It would." "Why?" Rowan looked directly into the wolf's clouded eyes. "Because this old soul has been waiting many years for someone whose heart still remembers mercy." The evening fire burned quietly between them. Rowan prepared a simple meal of mushrooms, wild herbs, and fresh spring water collected from the mountainside. The blind wolf rested nearby, its breathing calm beneath the stars. For a long time, none of them spoke. Only the wind moved through the pines. Finally, Rowan broke the silence. "Do you know why the hunters wanted him?" Elara shook her head. "They called him a monster." "They call many things monsters." His voice carried no anger, only sadness. This wolf was never feared because of what he was. He was feared because of what he knew. Elara leaned closer. "The truth?" Rowan nodded. "The last witness." "Witness to what?" The old guardian stared into the flames. "To the day the world betrayed its greatest friend." His eyes lifted toward the mountains beyond the trees. "He once walked beside the Alpha King." The fire crackled softly. "He was not a servant. Not a guard. He was his closest companion. The last living soul who remembers what truly happened." A chill crept through Elara despite the warmth of the fire. If he remembers. Why has no one heard the truth? Rowan's face darkened. Because those who buried the truth made certain that every witness disappeared. The blind wolf slowly lifted its head. Its ears turned sharply toward the darkness beyond the shrine. Every raven perched above them suddenly took flight. The forest became silent. Completely silent. Even the wind seemed to stop breathing. Rowan rose so quickly that his wooden bowl tipped into the fire. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "They found us." Before Elara could ask who, a hunting horn echoed through the mountains. Then another. Then another. The sound rolled across the cliffs like thunder. Moments later, torchlight flickered among the trees below. Dozens of flames. Moving uphill. Moving fast. Captain Garrick had not come with a handful of hunters. He had come with an army. And they were closing in from every direction. The first arrow struck the ancient shrine before anyone spoke another word. It slammed into a weathered stone pillar with a sharp crack, scattering flakes of moss across the cold ground. The sound shattered the stillness, sending the last of Rowan's ravens bursting into the night sky. Another arrow followed. Then another. They landed closer this time. One buried itself in the fire, sending glowing embers swirling into the darkness. "The mountain is surrounded," Rowan said, his voice calm despite the danger. "They expected us to climb. They never imagined where we would descend." He grabbed his weathered staff and motioned toward the broken statue at the center of the shrine. The blind wolf was already moving. Without hesitation, it crossed the cracked floor and stopped beside the ancient monument. It lowered its head until its nose brushed the cold stone. A deep rumble echoed beneath the earth. Elara stepped back. Dust drifted from the fractured ceiling as hidden gears, untouched for centuries, groaned somewhere below. The statue slowly turned. Behind it, a narrow opening appeared in the mountain itself. A forgotten passage. Before Elara could fully understand what she was seeing, Rowan gently took her arm. "Come. What about the others? They're already too close." The distant sound of boots striking stone echoed through the ruins. Voices shouted orders. Metal clanged against metal. The hunters had reached the shrine. The three companions disappeared into the darkness just as the hidden doorway sealed itself behind them. The tunnel swallowed every trace of moonlight. Only Rowan's small lantern pushed back the darkness, its warm glow revealing rough stone walls covered with roots that twisted through the mountain like giant veins. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling. The air smelled clean. Old. Untouched. Elara ran her fingers across the wall as they walked. The stone felt strangely smooth. Not carved by nature. By careful hands. She lifted the lantern higher. Pictures stretched along the tunnel in faded colors. Not paintings. Murals. They covered the walls from floor to ceiling. One showed children laughing beside wolves as they planted young trees together. Another depicted men and women sharing harvest feasts while wolves rested peacefully beside enormous stone tables. Further ahead, kings stood shoulder to shoulder with silver wolves beneath banners decorated with the same 7 stars carved into the pendant. The faces had faded. The colors had dimmed. But the feeling remained. Trust. Belonging. Peace. Elara stopped walking. This was real. Rowan nodded without slowing. More real than the stories people tell today. If this existed, why does no one remember? The old guardian sighed. Because memory is easier to destroy than stone. Hours seemed to pass beneath the mountain. The tunnels wound endlessly through chambers carved by forgotten craftsmen whose names had long since disappeared from history. Sometimes they crossed narrow bridges suspended above underground rivers that shimmered like liquid glass. Sometimes they squeezed through passages where crystal formations grew from the walls, glowing faintly with pale blue light. The deeper they traveled, the quieter the world became. Even the sounds of Garrick's pursuit faded behind them. Only their footsteps remained. The blind wolf never hesitated. It moved confidently through every turn, every narrow passage, every hidden stairway. Its clouded eyes remained fixed upon nothing. Yet it never stumbled. Elara finally asked the question that had followed her since the night they met. How can he know the way? Rowan smiled gently. Not every path is seen with the eyes. She looked at the old wolf. He remembers. He remembers what the mountain itself remembers. At last, the tunnel widened into an enormous chamber. Elara stopped in astonishment. The ceiling disappeared high above into darkness, where thousands of crystal roots hung like frozen rivers of light. They glowed softly in shades of silver and blue, filling the cavern with a gentle radiance that needed no fire. Their light reflected across a perfectly still underground lake. The water was so clear that it mirrored the ceiling exactly, making it seem as though another glowing world rested beneath their feet. Ancient trees grew along the edges of the chamber. Their roots disappeared into the crystal stone, drawing life from somewhere deep inside the mountain. The place felt alive. Not with noise. With memory. Rowan lowered his lantern. "We are safe here." Elara could barely whisper. "What is this place?" "The Hall of Roots. No one knows it exists anymore." The blind wolf walked slowly toward the water's edge. Its reflection stared back with clouded white eyes. For the first time since Elara had met it, the old wolf seemed tired. Not from its injured leg. From carrying something far heavier. Rowan knelt beside the lake. He dipped both hands into the water before gently splashing a few drops across the wolf's forehead. The old animal closed its eyes. The glowing roots above them brightened. Soft ripples spread across the lake without anyone touching its surface. Elara watched in silence. "What are you doing?" "Helping him remember." "He remembers already." "Not enough." Rowan's voice became almost reverent. The poison stole more than his sight. It buried his memories beneath pain. The mountain awakens what kindness begins. The blind wolf lifted its head. Its breathing deepened. A low sound escaped its chest. Not a growl. Not a howl. Something softer. Almost mournful. The crystals responded. Light flowed through them like moonlight moving beneath ice. Suddenly, images appeared across the surface of the lake. Not reflections. Memories. Elara gasped. She saw a valley unlike anything she had imagined. White trees stretched toward a golden sky. Children ran through fields covered in wildflowers while wolves raced beside them. Laughter filled the air. No fear. No chains. No weapons. Men built homes with wolves resting nearby. Women carried baskets of fruit while wolf cubs chased butterflies through the grass. The world looked impossibly peaceful. Then another image emerged. A magnificent wolf larger than all the others stood upon a high stone cliff. His coat gleamed like sunlight. Golden. His eyes shone with quiet wisdom. Beside him stood a human king wearing no crown. The two rulers faced one another. Then placed a hand. And a paw. Upon the same ancient stone. The 7 stars appeared above them. "The covenant," Rowan whispered. They swore that neither kingdom would ever rule the other. They would protect one another. They would share the forest. They would share the future. The images shifted again. Darkness spread. Smoke rose into the sky. Flames consumed villages. Soldiers marched beneath unfamiliar banners. A group of richly dressed nobles gathered secretly inside a stone hall. One held out a jeweled goblet. Another smiled. A servant carried a bowl toward the Alpha King's closest companion. Toward the blind wolf. The old wolf drank. Moments later, it stumbled. Its eyes widened in agony. It cried out. Not in anger. In confusion. The world blurred. Darkness swallowed its sight forever. Elara covered her mouth. "No." Rowan closed his eyes. They poisoned him. They knew they could never defeat the Alpha King while his oldest companion remained beside him. So they blinded him. They blamed wolves for attacks they themselves committed. They burned villages. Killed livestock. Murdered travelers. Then whispered the same lie everywhere. "The wolves have betrayed us." Generation after generation. The lie became history. The truth became legend. The vision faded. The underground lake became still once more. The blind wolf remained motionless. A single tear slipped from beneath one clouded eye. Elara slowly knelt beside him. She rested her hand against his broad shoulder. The old wolf leaned gently into her touch. No words could have eased centuries of grief. Sometimes kindness spoke loudest through silence. Rowan looked at them both. "You understand now." Elara nodded slowly. They stole more than his sight. They stole an entire world. The guardian rose and walked toward one of the crystal roots. Embedded inside the stone rested an ancient chest wrapped in thick vines. He carefully opened it. Inside lay weathered scrolls. Stone tablets. Broken seals. Fragments of forgotten history. The proof still exists. Elara stared at the collection. Then why not show the kingdom? We tried. His voice grew heavy. Many times. What happened? The messengers never returned. The records disappeared. The kings believed lies because lies were easier than truth. He picked up one faded scroll. Truth has enemies. They wear crowns. They carry swords. They smile. Before Elara could answer, the mountain shook. Dust drifted from the glowing roots. The underground lake rippled violently. A distant explosion thundered through the tunnels. Rowan's face lost all color. They've breached the outer passages. Another violent tremor echoed beneath their feet. Stone cracked somewhere in the darkness. The blind wolf struggled to stand. Its ears turned toward the tunnel behind them. From far away, a hunting horn sounded. Faint, but growing louder. Garrick had found the hidden roads beneath the mountain. And this time, he was bringing more than hunters. The hunting horn echoed through the tunnels like the cry of some restless beast. Once, twice. Then silence returned. Not the peaceful silence of the mountain. The heavy silence that comes before disaster. Fine cracks spread across the ceiling as another distant blast rolled through the hidden passages. Pebbles skipped across the stone floor and disappeared into the underground lake. Rowan closed the ancient chest without hesitation. There is no more time. He carefully wrapped the oldest scrolls in thick leather and tied them across his back. His movements were practiced, almost routine, as though he had prepared for this moment his entire life. Elara looked toward the tunnel where the sound had come from. Can they reach us? They already have. His voice remained calm. The Hall of Roots has protected the truth for centuries. He rested one weathered hand upon the glowing crystal beside him. But every sanctuary falls if enough people arrive carrying hate. The blind wolf slowly stood. Its injured leg had healed enough to bear its weight, though a slight limp remained. It lifted its nose toward another tunnel hidden behind a curtain of crystal roots. Without waiting for either of them, it began walking. Rowan smiled faintly. He knows another way. The new passage was unlike the others. Warm air drifted toward them, carrying the fresh scent of pine needles, wildflowers, and melting snow. Somewhere ahead, birds were singing. Elara stopped. Birds? Rowan nodded. We're close. The tunnel gradually widened until sunlight appeared ahead, spilling across the stone floor in brilliant golden beams. After hours beneath the mountain, the light almost hurt her eyes. The blind wolf reached the opening first. It paused there quietly, as though inviting her to step beyond before it did. Elara climbed the last few rocky steps. Then, the world opened before her. She forgot to breathe. Hidden beyond walls of towering mountains lay a valley untouched by time. White-leafed trees stretched across gentle hills like clouds resting upon the earth. Crystal streams wound through endless meadows where thousands of wildflowers painted the grass in shades of blue, gold, and crimson. Ancient stone bridges crossed narrow rivers. Small waterfalls spilled from the cliffs, their mist catching the sunlight and forming shimmering rainbows that lingered above the valley floor. Butterflies drifted lazily between flowering bushes. Eagles circled high overhead. The air itself seemed lighter, cleaner, alive. Scattered among the trees stood graceful stone buildings woven together with living vines. None were grand. None needed to be. Nature had embraced every wall until it became impossible to tell where forest ended and home began. Elara whispered the only words that came to her. It's beautiful. Rowan smiled. It was always meant to be. She looked across the valley. I've never seen this place on any map. Because no map has ever been allowed to remember it. Movement stirred among the white trees. One wolf appeared. Then another. Then 10 more. Within moments, dozens emerged from every direction. Grey wolves, white wolves, black wolves whose coats gleamed like polished obsidian beneath the afternoon sun. Some were enormous, others scarcely larger than young deer. Among them ran playful wolf cubs, tumbling through flowers while older wolves watched with patient eyes. Not one showed aggression. Instead, they quietly formed two long lines stretching from the cave entrance toward the heart of the valley. An open path. An invitation. The blind wolf stepped forward. Every wolf lowered its head as it passed. Not out of fear. Out of respect. Some gently brushed their noses against its shoulder. Others simply stood silently until it had gone by. Elara watched with quiet amazement. They honor him. They honor memory, Rowan answered softly. He carries the last living memory of the world they lost. As they walked deeper into the valley, more wonders revealed themselves. Young wolves played beside children. An elderly woman knelt near a stream washing herbs while two wolves patiently waited beside her baskets. A teenage boy repaired the roof of a small stone cottage as a pair of wolf cubs chased falling leaves around the ladder. Human. Wolf. Working. Laughing. Living. Together. The scenes felt impossible. Not because they were magical. Because they were peaceful. Elara's heart tightened. All her life she had been taught that such a thing could never exist. Yet here it was. Quietly surviving beyond the reach of fear. The path finally ended before an enormous tree unlike any she had ever seen. Its trunk was wider than a village house. Golden leaves shimmered overhead despite the approaching winter. Its roots spread across the valley like gentle waves before disappearing beneath smooth white stone. Resting beneath its branches lay a single wolf. He was larger than every other wolf present. Age had softened the strength of his once powerful body. His golden coat had faded with countless winters into pale silver touched with amber. Long scars crossed his shoulders. One ear carried an old wound. His breathing was slow. Steady. His eyes held the weight of centuries. They were neither fierce nor proud. Only endlessly tired. Yet within them remained a quiet kindness that no hardship had managed to extinguish. Every wolf in the valley lowered its head. Every human did the same. Rowan removed his cloak and knelt. "My king." The great wolf slowly rose. Age showed in every careful movement. Still, the dignity surrounding him filled the valley more completely than any throne ever could. His gaze settled upon the blind wolf. The old companion limped forward. For several long moments, neither moved. Then the Alpha King gently pressed his forehead against the blind wolf's. Neither growled. Neither howled. They simply remained together. Two old friends separated by unimaginable sorrow. Elara noticed moisture gathering in the Alpha King's eyes. He had waited many years for this moment. When he finally lifted his head, his gaze turned toward Elara. She expected judgment. Instead, she found gratitude. The Alpha King stepped slowly toward her. Though enormous, every movement remained gentle. He stopped only a few feet away. His deep amber eyes searched hers. Then, he lowered his head. Not as a king receiving loyalty. As one offering thanks. A soft voice filled the quiet valley. It did not come from moving lips. It echoed gently inside her heart. You carried hope, when the world carried fear. Elara gasped softly. She looked toward Rowan. I heard. The old guardian smiled. You were meant to. The Alpha King speaks only when trust is stronger than fear. Again the calm voice reached her. You saved, my oldest friend. Elara slowly knelt. I only did what anyone should have done. A warmth unlike anything she had ever known spread gently through her chest. The Alpha King's eyes softened. No, very few would have. As evening settled over the valley, fires were lit beneath the ancient trees. Families gathered together. Fresh bread baked inside stone ovens. The sweet scent of honey, herbs, and roasted vegetables drifted through the cool mountain air. Musicians quietly played wooden flutes whose melodies blended with the distant sounds of flowing water. Elara shared a simple meal beside Rowan. She watched children laughing as wolf cubs chased glowing fireflies across the meadow. No one seemed afraid. Not even the smallest child. A little girl dropped a piece of bread. Before she could reach it, an old grey wolf gently nudged it back toward her with its nose. The child laughed. She scratched behind its ears before running back to her mother. The simple moment brought unexpected tears to Elara's eyes. This She whispered. Should have been the world. Rowan looked toward the Alpha King resting beneath the great tree. It once was. Later that night, the Alpha King asked Elara to walk beside him. They followed a narrow stream reflecting countless stars. The blind wolf walked quietly behind them. For a long time, none of them spoke. Finally, the Alpha King's gentle voice returned. When humans feared wolves, I chose silence. Elara looked at him. I thought hiding would spare innocent lives. He paused beside the flowing water. But silence became another kind of betrayal. She waited. The lie grew stronger. Children inherited fear. Kings inherited hatred. My people inherited grief. He lowered his great head. I believed every attempt to reveal the truth would only bring more death. The sadness in his eyes seemed endless. I failed them. Elara shook her head. You protected those you could. I abandoned those I couldn't. The quiet confession lingered beneath the stars. She stepped closer. You carried everyone you could for generations. The burden was never meant for one heart alone. The old king closed his eyes. For the first time in centuries, someone had answered his guilt with compassion instead of blame. Their peaceful conversation ended abruptly. A young wolf sprinted across the meadow, breathing hard. It stopped before the Alpha King. Its body trembled. Its ears lay flat. Without a word, everyone understood. Something terrible had happened. Moments later another scout arrived. Then another. Each carried the same expression. Fear. Rowan hurried toward them. What is it? The youngest scout struggled to catch his breath. The Eastern Pass. He swallowed. They found it. A heavy silence fell across the valley. The Alpha King slowly turned toward the mountains. Far away, tiny orange lights flickered along the distant cliffs. Torches. Hundreds of them. No. Thousands. Like a river of fire slowly pouring down the mountainside. Captain Garrick had not come searching for one blind wolf anymore. He had come to erase an entire hidden kingdom. And for the first time in countless generations, the Alpha King understood that no place remained left to hide. Night settled over the hidden valley like a dark cloak, yet no one slept. The joyful sounds that had filled the meadows only hours before had faded into uneasy silence. Fires still burned beneath the ancient white trees, but their warm glow now illuminated worried faces instead of quiet laughter. Mothers gathered their children close. The youngest wolf cubs were gently led into the shelter of stone homes hidden beneath the great roots. Scouts moved swiftly between the trees, carrying whispered reports from every mountain pass. The valley had survived in secrecy for generations. Now secrecy had become impossible. Elara stood beneath the great golden tree where the Alpha King gazed toward the distant cliffs. The river of torches was still visible, crawling lower across the mountainside like glowing veins spreading through stone. The enemy had not rushed forward. They were surrounding the valley. Patiently, methodically. Captain Garrick had learned from every failure. This time, he intended to leave no path of escape. A cold breeze stirred the branches overhead. Golden leaves drifted quietly to the earth around the Alpha King's paws. He watched each leaf fall before speaking. My father planted this tree. His voice echoed gently inside Elara's heart. It was only a sapling when the covenant was signed. Elara looked upward. The enormous branches stretched across half the valley, sheltering homes, gardens, and quiet gathering places beneath their living canopy. It has seen every season. The Alpha King's eyes remained fixed upon the distant mountains. It has also witnessed every betrayal. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Elara broke the silence. What will you do? The old king answered without hesitation. I will go to Garrick. She turned sharply toward him. No. If he wants me, he will spare the valley. You know he won't. The Alpha King lowered his head. I know. Then why? Because kings are meant to stand between danger and those they protect. His calm acceptance struck Elara harder than any shouted argument could have. He was not afraid of dying. He had already accepted that possibility long ago. Rowan approached carrying several ancient scrolls wrapped carefully inside weathered leather. Around him gathered elders from both the human families and the wolf packs. Their faces carried deep lines carved by years of quiet endurance. "The records are ready," Rowan said. "If the valley falls, the truth must not." An elderly woman gently accepted one bundle. Another was given to a young hunter whose bow had never been used against wolves. Each person received only a single scroll. Elara frowned. "Why divide them?" Rowan smiled sadly. "Because one fire cannot burn 100 truths if they are carried by 100 hands." She looked around the gathering. No one argued. No one complained. Every person quietly accepted their burden. For generations they had protected a secret. Now, they would become its messengers. Before dawn, the Alpha King called the entire valley together beneath the great tree. Families emerged from every corner of the hidden sanctuary. Children stood quietly beside their parents. Wolf packs formed silent circles around them. The blind silver wolf rested at the Alpha King's side. Its clouded eyes reflected the first pale light of morning. The valley became so still that the distant waterfall sounded louder than ever before. The Alpha King's gaze moved slowly across every familiar face. His family. His people. The ones he had carried through centuries of hiding. His voice reached every heart. "We have lived in silence." The wind carried golden leaves across the meadow. "We believed silence would preserve peace." He looked toward the children. "But fear does not disappear when ignored. It grows. It teaches. It becomes tradition." Many lowered their heads. Some wiped quiet tears from their cheeks. The Alpha King continued. "Our ancestors built bridges. We inherited walls." His eyes found Elara. "But one act of kindness has shown us another path." He slowly turned back toward his people. "We will not answer hatred with hatred. We will answer lies with truth." A long silence followed. Then, one by one, every wolf lifted its head toward the brightening sky. A single low howl rose across the valley. It was not the fierce cry of hunters, nor the mournful song of loss. It sounded like a promise. Soon another joined. Then another. Until the mountains themselves seemed to sing. Elara closed her eyes. For the first time, she understood that wolves did not howl to frighten the night. Sometimes, they howled to give one another courage. The peaceful moment ended when a scout raced into the valley. His breathing came in sharp bursts. "They've crossed the eastern ridge." Another scout followed. "The southern pass is surrounded." A third arrived only moments later. "The western cliffs." His voice faltered. "They've blocked them too." The valley had become a cage. Captain Garrick stood upon a rocky overlook high above the sanctuary. Morning sunlight gleamed against polished armor as hundreds of soldiers formed neat ranks behind him. More arrived every minute. Banners bearing the royal crest fluttered in the cold wind. Large wooden wagons creaked slowly along the mountain road. Ballistae. Heavy siege engines. Enough to shatter stone walls. Enough to destroy forests. Garrick surveyed the valley below through a brass spyglass. A slow smile spread across his weathered face. "So, you do exist." He lowered the glass. "Burn every path. No one leaves." One nervous young soldier hesitated. "There are children down there." Garrick never looked at him. "There are wolves." The soldier fell silent. Orders echoed across the mountains. Axes began biting into ancient trees. Tar barrels rolled into position. Archers lined the cliffs. The siege had begun. Back inside the valley, Rowan watched smoke rising beyond the eastern forest. "They're cutting everything." Ilara's heart sank. "They're destroying the woods. They aren't fighting us. They're starving us." The realization spread quickly among the gathered families. The streams that flowed into the valley passed through those forests. The game animals grazed there. Medicinal herbs grew there. Without the forest, the valley itself would slowly die. Captain Garrick understood that. He intended to let hunger finish what swords might not. That evening, Elara walked alone beside the crystal stream. The blind wolf quietly followed. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. She watched tiny fish swimming against the current. She watched dragonflies skim the water's surface. Everything appeared peaceful. Yet smoke continued rising beyond the distant mountains. She knelt beside the stream. Her reflection stared back from the clear water. Tired eyes. Mud-stained cloak. Hair tangled by endless travel. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Only days earlier, she had believed her greatest responsibility was healing sick villagers. Now, an entire hidden kingdom stood on the edge of destruction. The blind wolf slowly approached. It rested its great head against her shoulder. Warm, steady, trusting. Elara gently wrapped one arm around its neck. "I don't know how to save you." The old wolf remained still. Its heartbeat echoed softly beneath her hand. Some burdens had no easy answers. That night, Elara sought Rowan beneath the Hall of Roots. The old guardian sat beside the glowing underground lake, studying one of the ancient scrolls. Without looking up, he said quietly, "You're searching for permission." She blinked. Permission? To do what your heart has already decided. She sat beside him. The valley cannot survive a siege. No, the Alpha King will never abandon his people. No, Garrick wants one thing. The Alpha King. Rowan carefully rolled the scroll shut. He wants fear. Elara looked into the glowing water. What if I give him something else? The old guardian finally met her eyes. Understanding slowly filled his weathered face. No, if I surrender, he'll stop hunting. He'll listen. Rowan shook his head. Garrick doesn't listen. Perhaps the Queen will. The Queen doesn't know you exist. Then she'll have to. Silence settled between them. At last Rowan whispered, "You may never return." Elara smiled faintly. "I wasn't thinking about returning." Before sunrise, she packed a small satchel. Only the essentials. Her herbs. The ancient pendant. A single blanket. Nothing more. She left the rest inside the little room she had been given beneath the white trees. Outside, the valley still slept. Only the Alpha King waited. He had known. Before she spoke a single word. He had known. The old king stepped toward her. Morning mist curled around his silvered paws. His amber eyes searched hers with quiet sadness. "You would carry this burden." It was not a question. Elara nodded. "If they see me surrender willingly, they may stop before innocent lives are lost. They may hear the truth." The Alpha King looked toward the awakening horizon. "I asked one healer to save a single life." His voice grew softer. "You now offer your own." She stepped closer. "You once told me silence became another betrayal." He lowered his head. "I remember." "Then let my voice reach where yours cannot." For a long moment, neither moved. Finally, the Alpha King gently touched his forehead to hers. Around them, every wolf in the valley quietly emerged from the trees. Not one made a sound. They simply watched, witnessing a promise no words could fully express. As the first rays of sunlight climbed over the mountains, Elara turned toward the narrow path leading out of the hidden valley. Behind her stood an entire forgotten kingdom. Ahead waited Captain Garrick, and a fate from which there might be no return. The mountain path was silent. Only the steady rhythm of Elara's footsteps broke the morning stillness as she climbed toward the ridge where Garrick's army waited. Frost covered the stones beneath her boots, sparkling beneath the pale sunlight before melting into tiny drops that slipped quietly down the cliffs. Behind her, hidden beyond walls of ancient rock, the valley slowly disappeared from view. She did not look back. She feared that if she saw the white trees one last time, her courage might falter. The ancient pendant rested beneath her cloak, warm against her chest. It felt heavier now. Not because it had changed. Because she finally understood what it carried. Not wealth. Not power. Hope. Before she reached the summit, soldiers emerged from behind the rocks. Crossbows were already raised. Steel glimmered in the cold morning light. One young soldier stepped forward. His beard had barely begun to grow. Fear filled his eyes far more than anger. "Stop where you are." Elara obeyed. She slowly raised her empty hands. "I've come willingly." Another soldier frowned. "Where are the wolves?" "They remained where they belong." The men exchanged uncertain glances. Nothing about the woman before them matched the terrifying stories they had been told. She carried no weapon, no armor, only a worn traveling cloak and a healer's satchel. Captain Garrick soon appeared between the ranks. His heavy boots crunched over frozen earth until he stood only a few steps away. For several long moments, he simply studied her. "I knew you'd come." Elara met his hard gaze. "I came so others wouldn't have to die." A cold smile touched his face. "You still think mercy changes anything?" She answered quietly. "It already has." Without another word, Garrick motioned to his soldiers. "Iron chains." The young soldier hesitated. "Captain." She surrendered. "She's unarmed." Garrick's eyes never left Elara. "Chains." The soldier reluctantly obeyed. Cold iron circled her wrists. She did not resist. She had made her choice before leaving the valley. The journey to the capital lasted 6 long days. Snow covered the northern roads. Bare trees stretched across the hills like dark fingers reaching toward grey skies. Villagers watched silently as Garrick's procession passed. People stepped from their homes to stare at the strange prisoner. Some recognized Elara. Others noticed only the chains. Rumors traveled faster than horses. The wolf witch. The forest sorceress. The woman who commanded monsters. Each village added another lie. Each mile made the truth seem farther away. Yet something unexpected happened. Whenever children looked at Elara, she smiled. Whenever frightened villagers stared at her, she lowered her eyes with quiet kindness instead of anger. More than once, an elderly woman secretly slipped fresh bread into her hands while the guards looked away. A stable boy quietly refilled her water flask during one cold evening. Even among strangers, compassion had not completely disappeared. It had only been buried beneath fear. On the final evening before reaching the capital, Garrick stopped beside a frozen lake. The soldiers built fires while horses rested after the long journey. Elara sat quietly beneath an old pine, her wrists still bound. Snowflakes drifted gently through the firelight. Garrick approached carrying 2 wooden cups. He placed one beside her. "Hot broth." She looked up in surprise. "I thought you wanted me dead." "I do." "Then why feed me?" He stared across the frozen lake. "I've watched kingdoms fall. I've buried friends. I've seen what wolves leave behind." Elara spoke softly. "Have you?" He finally looked at her. "My father died hunting them." "And who told you the wolves killed him?" The question lingered in the cold air. Garrick's expression darkened. "I buried him myself." "But did you see it happen?" Silence. Only the crackling fire answered. For the first time, a tiny crack appeared in the wall of certainty he had carried for decades. It lasted only a heartbeat. Then it disappeared. He stood abruptly. "You've learned to poison minds as well as beasts." He walked away before she could answer. Yet long after he disappeared into the camp, his untouched cup of broth remained where he had left it. The capital rose above the plains like a mountain carved from stone. High walls surrounded countless rooftops. Massive towers pierced the winter sky. Colorful banners fluttered from every gate. Market bells echoed through crowded streets. The scent of fresh bread mixed with smoke from hundreds of chimneys. To most travelers, the city represented safety. To Elara, it felt strangely empty. The trees were gone. The birds sounded fewer. Even the wind seemed trapped between endless walls. Crowds gathered as Garrick's soldiers entered through the northern gate. People pointed. Children climbed onto barrels for a better view. Voices filled the streets. "That's her. The wolf woman. They say she speaks to demons." They say she controls the forest. Some shouted insults. Others simply watched with uncertain faces. Elara kept walking. Fear always shouted louder than truth. The royal palace stood at the city's highest point. Its marble steps had been polished by generations of kings and queens. Towering stained glass windows reflected the pale winter sun. Massive oak doors opened slowly as Garrick entered with his prisoner. Inside, everything became quiet. The great throne hall stretched farther than Elara could see at first glance. Tall stone columns supported a ceiling painted with scenes of ancient victories. Long crimson banners hung motionless in the still air. Rows of nobles lined both sides of the chamber. Judges, military commanders, priests, royal advisors. Each pair of eyes turned toward the woman in chains. At the far end of the hall, upon a throne carved from white stone, sat Queen Eleanor. Age had silvered her hair but had not weakened the sharp intelligence in her calm blue eyes. She carried herself with quiet dignity rather than pride. Unlike many rulers, she listened before speaking. She studied Elara carefully. Then Garrick. Explain. Garrick knelt. My queen. I have captured the woman responsible for aiding the Wolf Kingdom. A wave of whispers swept across the court. Wolf Kingdom. It truly exists. The legends. Queen Eleanor raised one hand. Silence returned immediately. She looked back toward Elara. What is your name? Elara. You stand accused of treason. Elara answered calmly. I stand for the truth. Another ripple of whispers spread through the nobles. Garrick stepped forward. The valley is real. Wolves live there. They gather an army. They hide weapons. They prepare to attack. Each sentence echoed confidently through the chamber. Many nobles nodded. It sounded believable. Fear often did. Queen Eleanor's expression remained unreadable. She turned back toward Elara. Is any of this true? There is a valley. The room stirred. There are wolves. More whispers. But they are preparing for survival. Not war. Garrick laughed harshly. She expects us to believe monsters desire peace. Elara looked directly at the queen. I expect only that your majesty sees with her own eyes before judging. The queen's fingers rested thoughtfully upon the arm of her throne. Before she could answer, something caught her attention. A faint silver gleam beneath Elara's cloak. The pendant. Every eye followed her gaze. Elara slowly reached beneath her cloak despite the guards tightening their grip. She carefully lifted the ancient pendant into the light. The moment Queen Eleanor saw the 7 stars, the color drained from her face. She rose from the throne so suddenly that even Garrick looked startled. Where? Her voice almost failed her. Did you find that? Elara frowned. The wolves gave it to me. The queen slowly descended the marble steps. Her eyes never left the pendant. With trembling fingers, she reached toward it but stopped just short of touching the ancient silver. I've seen this before. The entire court fell silent. Garrick stared in disbelief. My queen. She ignored him. My grandmother. Her voice softened into little more than a whisper. Kept drawings hidden inside her private chambers. She said they were never to be shown. Never. Tears began gathering in her eyes. I thought they were fairy tales. She looked directly into Elara's face. No. They were memories. A heavy silence settled over the throne room. Then, from somewhere beyond the great palace doors, a single wolf's howl echoed across the city. Every noble froze. Every guard reached instinctively for his sword. Another howl answered. Closer. Then another. Not 1. Not 10. Dozens. The sound rolled through the capital like distant thunder. The blind wolf had come. And it had not come alone. The first howl faded into silence. Then another rose beyond the palace walls. Not fierce. Not threatening. Steady. Ancient. It rolled through the streets of the capital, climbed the marble towers, and echoed beneath the vaulted ceiling of the throne hall until every soul inside stood frozen. No one spoke. Even the soldiers gripping their spears glanced uneasily toward the great doors. Outside, the city had fallen strangely quiet. The merchants who only moments before had shouted through crowded marketplaces now stood motionless. Children stopped chasing one another through narrow streets. Horses stamped nervously inside their stalls. Somewhere beyond the palace gates, dozens of wolves had entered the capital. Yet no screams followed. No crashing carts. No sounds of attack. Only silence. Captain Garrick slowly drew his sword. "They've come for her." His voice carried through the hall. "They'll slaughter everyone." The queen did not answer. Her eyes remained fixed on the ancient pendant resting in Elara's hands. Another howl drifted through the windows. Closer this time. Then, soft footsteps echoed beyond the great oak doors. The palace guards lowered their spears. The enormous doors slowly opened. Cold winter air swept inside. Snowflakes drifted across the polished marble floor. Standing alone in the doorway was the blind silver wolf. Its coat shimmered beneath the pale afternoon light. Age had bent its powerful shoulders. The old wound upon its leg had healed, though the faint limp remained. Its clouded white eyes saw nothing. Yet every step carried quiet certainty. Behind it, beyond the palace entrance, dozens of wolves waited outside. Not one crossed the threshold. They remained still upon the palace steps. Watching. Waiting. The blind wolf alone entered the throne hall. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Several guards instinctively stepped backward. Others tightened trembling fingers around their swords. Captain Garrick pointed his blade toward the old animal. "Kill it." No one moved. The wolf had not growled. It had not bared its teeth. It simply continued walking. Its paws echoed softly across the marble floor. Tap, tap, tap. The sound filled the hall more completely than any battle cry. The blind wolf ignored Garrick entirely. It walked past rows of frightened nobles, past soldiers, past priests, until it stopped before Queen Eleanor. The aging queen stared down into the wolf's clouded eyes. Her breathing became unsteady. "I know you." The words escaped before she realized she had spoken them. Not because she truly remembered. Because something deep within her family's forgotten history did. The blind wolf slowly lowered its head. Then turned toward the throne. Not the queen. The throne itself. It began sniffing along the polished white stone. Back and forth. Patiently. Searching. The court watched in complete silence. Finally, the old wolf stopped. Its nose rested against one particular stone beneath the throne. It scratched once. Twice. Then stepped away. Queen Eleanor frowned. "There." She pointed. "Move the throne." The guards looked uncertain. "My queen." "Move it." Four soldiers hurried forward. With considerable effort they pushed the massive stone throne aside. Beneath it, the floor appeared ordinary, until sunlight struck one carved edge hidden beneath centuries of dust. The queen knelt. Her fingers brushed away the dirt. 7 stars emerged. The same 7 stars carved into Elara's pendant. A murmur swept through the hall. "There is something beneath." The queen looked toward her captain of engineers. "Open it." Heavy tools were brought into the throne room. Stone echoed against iron as workers carefully lifted the ancient slab. Dust filled the air. A stale breath of forgotten centuries escaped from below. A narrow staircase disappeared into darkness. No one spoke. The queen herself picked up a lantern. "I will go first." Garrick stepped forward. "It could be a trap." She looked directly into his eyes. "If my ancestors hid this, then I deserve to see it." Without waiting for permission, she descended. Elara followed. The blind wolf came next. Behind them, Rowan's ancient pendant cast faint silver reflections upon the walls as though the stone itself recognized its return. The staircase ended inside a circular chamber. The air was dry, still, untouched. No dust covered the walls. Instead, every inch of stone had been carved. Massive murals surrounded the room, perfectly preserved. The first showed humans and wolves planting forests together. The next showed children riding upon enormous wolves through flowering meadows. Another revealed kings shaking hands beside the Alpha King beneath the sacred 7 stars. Then, the final mural. Flames. Poison. Betrayal. Richly dressed nobles secretly offering a jeweled cup to the Alpha King's closest companion. The same silver wolf. The blind wolf standing quietly beside them. Its sight stolen through treachery. Beneath the carvings, ancient words remained untouched. Queen Eleanor slowly traced them with trembling fingers. I know this language. She closed her eyes. My grandmother insisted I learn it. Her voice broke. No one else would. She began reading aloud. Let every ruler remember. The wolves did not break the covenant. She swallowed. Men broke it. Silence filled the chamber. She continued. Let this truth remain hidden until a ruler chooses justice over pride. Tears rolled freely down her face. It was all true. Captain Garrick descended into the chamber moments later. His boots echoed sharply across the ancient floor. The moment he saw the murals, his face lost every trace of confidence. No. He whispered it to himself. No. The Queen turned toward him. Did you know? He remained silent. She stepped closer. Answer me. His breathing quickened. My grandfather. He stopped. The chamber seemed to close around him. My grandfather guarded these records. Every noble stared in disbelief. He said the truth would destroy the kingdom. Queen Eleanor's voice hardened. So your family buried it. We protected stability. You protected power. His shoulders sagged. It was too late. No. The Queen's words echoed against the ancient stone. It was easier. For the first time in decades, Captain Garrick looked old. Not strong. Not terrifying. Only tired. Years of hatred had become too heavy to carry. He slowly dropped his sword. The blade clattered across the floor. I believed them. His voice cracked. My father believed them. His father believed them. He looked toward the blind wolf. I hunted you. For a lie. The old wolf stood quietly. It neither forgave nor condemned him. It simply watched with clouded eyes that had witnessed generations of sorrow. The truth spread through the capital before sunset. The hidden chamber remained open. Citizens entered in small groups. Farmers. Blacksmiths. Teachers. Children. Each left with the same expression. Shock. Followed by grief. Then understanding. The stories they had inherited were not history. They were fear dressed as history. Outside the palace, the waiting wolves never moved. People approached cautiously. A little girl carrying a basket of winter flowers slowly stepped toward a large grey wolf. Her father reached for her. Then stopped. The wolf lowered its head. The child smiled. She tucked one white flower gently behind its ear. The great animal closed its eyes. The crowd watched. No blood was spilled. Only another lie quietly disappeared. Days later, representatives from the Hidden Valley entered the capital openly for the first time in centuries. There were no chains. No drawn swords. Only cautious hope. The Alpha King walked through the palace gardens beneath bare winter trees. Queen Eleanor met him there. Neither spoke at first. Words seemed far too small. Finally, the Queen removed her royal crown. She placed it upon the stone bench beside her. Then, she bowed. Not as a queen surrendering. As one ruler apologizing to another. I cannot return the centuries that were stolen. Her voice trembled. But I can choose what comes next. The Alpha King gently lowered his great head. A new covenant was written beneath the old oak that afternoon. This one was witnessed not only by nobles, but by farmers, children, healers, hunters, and wolves. Because peace survived only when ordinary hearts chose to protect it. Winter slowly surrendered to spring. Snow melted from the mountains. The forests awakened. Green returned to branches that had stood bare for so long. Children from nearby villages cautiously visited the hidden valley. Before long, caution became laughter. Wolf cubs chased them through fields of wildflowers. Streams echoed with happy voices instead of frightened whispers. The old wounds of two kingdoms began to heal. Slowly, patiently, like broken bones learning to carry weight again. One quiet morning, Elara awoke before sunrise. Something felt different. The cottage beneath the great golden tree was unusually still. She stepped outside. The valley rested beneath a blanket of silver mist. Birds had only begun their morning songs. She followed familiar paw prints toward the hill overlooking the valley. There, beneath blooming white flowers, lay the blind wolf. Its breathing had become soft. Very soft. The Alpha King rested beside his oldest friend. Neither spoke. They no longer needed words. Elara knelt quietly. She placed one gentle hand upon the old wolf's shoulder. The familiar silver fur still felt warm. The blind wolf slowly lifted its head toward her voice. Its clouded eyes remained empty. Yet somehow, she felt seen. Really seen. It leaned forward one final time. Its nose gently touched her hand. Exactly as it had on the morning trust first bloomed beside her cottage. A slow breath escaped its chest. Then another. Then, only silence. The morning breeze stirred the white flowers around them. The oldest witness to the kingdom's forgotten truth had finally found peace. A single tear slipped down the Alpha King's face. He lowered his forehead against his companion's. The valley stood in respectful silence. Even the birds seemed to pause their songs. Together, humans and wolves carried the old guardian to the highest hill overlooking the valley. No grand monument was built. The blind wolf had never wanted one. Instead, they planted 7 young trees around the resting place. One for each star upon the ancient covenant. One for every generation that would never again inherit fear instead of truth. As the final handful of earth settled gently over the grave, dozens of wolves lifted their heads toward the bright spring sky. Their song drifted across the mountains. This time, the villages did not lock their doors. People stepped outside instead. They listened. And for the first time in living memory, they understood. It was not a cry of danger. It was a farewell. Years passed. The 7 trees grew tall. The hidden valley no longer hid. Trade roads connected villages that had once feared one another. Forest healers shared medicines with city physicians. Hunters became forest guardians, protecting the balance they had once threatened. Captain Garrick faced judgment before the royal court. His crimes were neither ignored nor excused. Stripped of rank and title, he spent the remainder of his life restoring the forests his hatred had helped destroy. Every sapling he planted stood as a quiet reminder that true justice was not only punishment, but the hard work of repairing what had been broken. Queen Eleanor established a new tradition. Every child in the kingdom, whether born in a city or a mountain village, would learn the true story of the covenant. Not as a legend. As history. Because forgotten truths have a way of becoming dangerous lies. As for Elara, she eventually returned to her little cottage on the edge of Ashmore. The roof still sagged beneath winter snow. The stream still sang over smooth stones. Her herb bundles once again hung beneath the windows. People came seeking her help just as they always had. But now they arrived carrying more than sickness. Sometimes they brought injured foxes. Sometimes wounded hawks. Sometimes abandoned wolf pups found wandering too far from home. No one questioned whether she would help them. They already knew the answer. On quiet evenings, when the wind wandered through the pine trees and the sun disappeared behind the northern mountains, Elara would often sit outside her cottage with a warm cup of herbal tea. From somewhere deep within the forest, a distant howl would rise beneath the stars. She would close her eyes, smile, and listen. Not with fear. With gratitude. Because she had learned a truth that kingdoms had forgotten for centuries. The strongest heart is not the one that conquers with a sword. It is the one that chooses compassion when the whole world expects fear. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness is powerful enough to heal 2 broken worlds.